Hello, welcome to Project Likkutei Torah, daf samech, daf 60 of Parshas Chukas, Sefer B'midbar Parshas Chukas, and we are on the sixth ice, the last ice of the beer, the Maimer, the Chukas Torah. Now it's brought down in Bereshis Rabbah and Parshas Chukas, B'midbar Rabbah Parshas Chukas, that we have a pasuk in Eiv that says "Mi ten tar mitami le'achad," meaning who has the koyach to take something that is tahor and make it tamei? It must be none other than Hashem Himself. For example, one examples of this would be Abraham coming from Terach, who was Oved of Zara, Chizkiah coming from Achaz, and Olam Haba coming from Olam Hazeh. Who could make this happen? Who could command this? Who can decree this? None other than Yichud Shalaylam, Hashem Himself. The Inyan of this mi ten tar mitame, it's possible to say we have a really strong question to ask, that which we are refining the Gimel Klippas at Meis, in the sense that, for example, Avraham Terach was Vodazara. So the question is how can it be possible to refine the Shalosh Klippas Tameas, which we know that until Lasid Lavo, we're not able to refine the Shalosh Klippas Tameas, right? So we should see in the Bir Zar, in the beginning of Parshas Chukas, in the Inyan Mayim Chaim, that it's brought down that Cahnman me'ayin timatze. What does that mean? That we need kapara to mamshach this level of ayin, which is keser, because there's a difference between making something tahar from Meis than all other hibirurim, all other refinements that we're refining tov from ra. And from Silas, because there, let's say you're finding good from bad, normal, let's say eichel from Silas, there it's just a regular birur. Refinement, you're taking something that has mixture of good and evil, and you're separating the good from the evil. You're not transforming the actual Silas to eichel, or you're not transforming the actual ra to tov. Now, that you're able to do this, the idea of separating good from bad, that's the idea of just general chachma, because chachma is bariru. That is how refinement works, specifically through chachma and separating. But in regards to this mitzvah paraduma and mitaring the tamei meis, this is a much higher level, because you're actually transforming something that's tamei meis, shalosh klippas tameis legamrei, and making it become tahor. It says Tumas meis nimshach v'mishviras hakelim v'imleich v'yamais chulei shnafel mata miklippas nega. So the whole idea is that we are able to draw down a much higher level than chachma from keser, and draw that higher level down and make it possible to transform something that was once completely tamei to make it tahor. And based on this whole Bir Zohar here that we're quoting, we can understand the Inyan is brought down in Gemara Shabbos, that Chachma represents Seder Kodshim in Mishnayos, all the laws in the Mishnayos corresponding to Karbanos, but Das represents and corresponds to Seder Taharis, the laws of making Tumentara. Because the Karbanos, that's the whole inyan of refining Klippas Noiga, the intermediate energy was a mixture of good and bad, but that's through Chachmas Beriru. That's why Chachmas Seder Kadoshim. However, I think this seder, this idea of kudshim, that's only through chachma. However, the idea of das, zeder tahares, the idea that of actually purifying something that's tameh, making it tahor again, that's specifically through das. And that, since it's the das, the reason why we need das to metayr and connected to the inyan of tahares is because das is kavim tsai, which is able to reach all the way up to keser. And that's what it means based on the pasuk in Eiv, mi'itein tar mitame le'achad, and the Midrash explains Yichud Shalaylam, that the Echad is that Yachid, that's represents Keser Davka, specifically from there. And this is the mimer of the Midrash Rabbah that we can explain another Midrash or further down in the same Midrash Rabbah in our Parsha. That it explains that in Parshas Amor, it says that the Kohen is not allowed to become Tameh and do his avodah when he's Tameh. And the Midrash says that Moshe Esika Kadosh Baruch Hu, so what happens when the Kohen becomes Tameh? How does he become Tahor? And Hashem did not answer him. So it says in the Midrash that in that moment, Moshe Rabbeinu's face, he became embarrassed and ashamed. It says in these karkamu panav, it became, I guess, like yellow. And once he reached the Parsha of Paraduma, then it was able to be explained that that's through Dafka through the Paraduma. So the question of this Midrash is that why would Moshe be ashamed or embarrassed that these karkamu panav how can Moshe even hint to the idea that Hashem doesn't know the answer? Obviously Hashem knows the answer. He just, for whatever reason, based on the Midrash, he delayed in answering. So what's going on here? So according to what we explained earlier, it makes sense because the Torah is nimshach from chachma ilah, specifically through chachma, and chachma is the idea of refinement. Chachma is bariru, to separate tahara tameh. However, this, to convert from Tuma to tahara, this is impossible to do through chachma. Therefore, niskark mupanav, his face turned yellow until they reached the Parsha of Paraduma, because only the Paraduma was able to provide this koyach and some shach of Chaim from this level of Chaim, which is from Keser. From there is to be able to nimshach, to become mitain, tahor, mטמא, etc. So that is the end of the beer of the first mimer of Parshas Chukas. Now moving on to the second mimer, which is the first of two deeper maschils, the same deeper maschil v'ikroy lecha paraduma. So it's brought down in Mishnayos Perkei. We're still on the first column of Daf Samach. Now it's brought down in the Mishnayos that in Mesachas Para. That with regards to the Kiddush Mechatas, the pouring of the water into the ashes of the red heifer and the mixing, this, even a woman can do this mixture process. However, Acheres, Sheiter, and Katan are not allowed to be a part of this, do this process. They're puzzled from doing that, the Kiddush Mechatos. However, the Hazah, the sprinkling of the Mechatos, it's the opposite. That a katan, a child, is allowed to do this, the sprinkling, but an isha is psula from doing the sprinkling. So we have a question. Why is it that, what's the reason why by the sprinkling woman is psula and a katan is kosher? However, by the kiddush mechatos, it's the opposite, mamish. So the inyan is that paraduma comes to retire the Tumas Meis, which is to the idea of pushing away the ruach tuma, just because Tumas agamre, there's no toiv at all. I need to say that from them, it's nimshach, this kiyum and chayas of the Maisa, tibur machshava of all the 365 laws that say of the Torah and their offshoots. Their chayas and their kiyum, my law is nimshach from the shalosh chuvas Tumas. And it's Kevin Yechazkel. It says in Kevin Yechazkel, Ruach Sa'ara, An Gadol, Veish Misakachas. They're called Pagarim Mesim because they don't have any chayas mitzad themselves at all. Meaning to say that the hamshacha of all of the Shalosh Klubas Tameas comes through this, the highest level of Tumas is Tumas Meis. And whenever anyone transgresses one of the mitzvahs, the negative mitzvahs, they are, I guess, drawing down this tuma and this lack of chayas into these into their machshav dibur ma'aseh. But so how do we remove this Tumas Meis through these transgressions? Specifically, the paraduma is the source of how we remove it. And dafka, the mayim chaim, that's mixed with these ashes and the eitz erz and the eitzaif. So why is this? Because paraduma, what's special about the paraduma? Para is parhe. So what is, or par Hashem, I guess. So what is this idea? Par is actually the gematria menatzbach, which adds up to par. And menatzbach is the syllables, the 5 main types of syllables that prevent flow of air coming from the mouth. And the hey represents the hey gvuris, the 5 gvuris, 5 severities, which is the source of division and his chalkos of oisius. Because basically when a person pronounces a word, they make a ha, that hey is that voice, that breath that comes out from the heart, which is that soft, that singular individual sound that comes out. And then it gets divided into oisius based on how our mouth and our tongue and our palate and our throat, our garain divides up that simple sound. Specifically the hematesapel, the guttural letters, the al, ah, then we have the palate letters, the g sounds, etc., etc. Similarly, the Mila by Hashem. Hashem has the same idea of oisius adibur, those letters of speech that are divided, and they are expressed in Hashem's malchus. Just like how Hashem animates the whole world through his speech, he speaks all the world into existence through the same process of separating through these hegvurus, etc. And these the 5 representing these 5 ways of separating and pronouncing different letters. But this is, even though it's expressed in malchus, it's really sourced in gvura, because it's parted through the hegvurus. But it's really sourced in bina, because bina is, even though it's not the letters of speech in bina, it's the letters of thought, which have these oisius, which from the letters of thought, they become expressed in letters of speech, and then they are able to be expressed into practically creating the world, creating aspects of creation. And so even as the letters of thought are still within the realm of thought, they're still divided into letters, which requires gvuras. That's why it's called gvuras de'ima. And the main ischalkos is in order to enliven and cause the nivraim, which are limited, to come into existence. Because in Atzilus, Hashem and his causations are all one. However, through the division and the shtalshelus that we're explaining, is able to receive a chayas also from the shalosh klippos Meis through this level of klippos nega that also has these hegvuris. They're gvuris kashes. They're very strong gvuris that come about from this level of ischalkos and yeshus mamish and through the pruda. So, in other words, that we're explaining here is that Hashem is creating the multitudes of creation through his koyach of gvura and gvul, which is the reason why there's so much hischalkos in the oisius of machshava and then dibur. Now, while the oisius that come down into this world act as a sense of concealment and separation, nevertheless, the oisius, as they are lamaila, it's very different, because there is hischalkos. However, hischalkos is in a manner of bittul. As it says in the pasuk in Nehemiah, the oisius, so to speak, are misachtim, they're united, just like the 70 soul, I should say, that of Yaakov that came down to Mitzrayim. They're all united. The fact that it says nefesh in the singular, because they all had this sense of bittul. But that's not the case with regards to noiga, as is the level of period in his chalkus mamish, as it comes down to this world in a manner of yesh. Now, skipping the parentheses, moving on, that this is the main inyan of the level of nega, of klippos nega. It's not like the 3 klippos Meis, which is completely ra, and also that nega is half ra and half tov. Nevertheless, and despite this, that also the tov that's within the nega is still called klippas nega. Klippa implies there's an element of yeshus, because it exists, just like the concept or through klippas nega, receiving from klippas gimel klippos Meis, that klippas nega is called half good and half evil. That from the level of half good, tov receives also the harra, and from the harra receives the 3 shalosh klippos Meis legamrei. And the meaning of tov is this hargashas yesh, feeling a sense of self. Nevertheless, just like it says in the Gemara, the person learns Mishnah in order so they be called Rabbi. And nevertheless, this level of klippos nega, when it's able to become refined and to reach this level of bittul in the Ein Sof, as the inyan with tzva shemaim l'chol mishtachavim. And this is the inyan that sometimes the level of Klipas Nega ascends completely to Kedusha. And this is the Inyan of Sreifas Apara, in order to remove the Ruach HaTuma from a person that has Tumas Meis, because the Para is the level of Klipas Nega. The Para represents the feminine Nukva element that receives from the Pnei Shor of the Merkava, but it is in this level of Gvuras Kashes, which is the Toiv Shebinega, the Par Hey, meaning the Par corresponding to the Hey Gvuras, which from it receives also the three Klipas Tmeas, as we spoke about earlier. And this is the Inyan, the mitzvah to burn the Par in Efer. So sages say, Ashkechan Efer de'ikre afar ksif. Lakach me afar srifas achatas. Everything that is burnt remains in this lowest level of creation, that remains this level of afar. That just like we know that there's 4 yisodes of creation, Eish, Ruach, Maim, and Afar, that the main hishavos, Hagashmi, comes from Afar, from earth. And the 3 higher yisodes are Merkavim within the foundational yisod, the most foundational of the yisodes, which is Afar. And therefore, through the burning, essentially what occurs is the other yisodes of Eish, Ruach, and Maim are separated. And then they remain only Yisod Ha'atzmi. They remain the Yisod Ha'atzmi, which is Afar. And so too, this Inyan of Sreifas Apara, that only the makar of Dibur is still in this level of Bittul, which is Afer, Afer is, if you move the letters around, it's Par Aleph, meaning that the Gvura as it is in its source. That's what Par Aleph represents. Because we already said before that Par is Gematria Menatbach. Before is Nimshach at this level of Yesh through the Hegvuras Nega, and in Memela is Pardukol Paliavin and Vahayu B'loi Hayu. Now moving on to Ois Beis. It's written in the rest of the pasuk with regards to Sreifas Apara and the process of paraduma. It says, Maim represents Chachma, and Maim Chaim represents the source of Chachma. So it's written Maim Chaim, which is this level of Hamayan, this wellspring, the source of water. As is written in Iyai, V'chachma mi'ayin timotze. This is the level of Tala Dibdulcha, which is the source of Chachmas Tima, as it is known. And hold that down here below. Maim Chaim flows mitachas la'aretz, from underneath the earth. Meaning, because now it's Tchilas and B'Seifan, that from the level of Chachma and below, it's this level of Shtashlos from Yesh to Yesh, from Chachma to Midas and to Machshav Dibur Maisa. That's not the case with regards to Chachma from above. Milmaila Mina Chachma who b'chinas me'ayin l'gesh. This gilui of this level is Lamata Ba'aretz Davka, because the Aretz sprouts, Matzmachas v'chazeres, Matzmachas. It sprouts and returns and sprouts. Adein Seif, as is written in the Pasuk Niyav, Eretz Mimena, Yoitze Lach. And similarly, the water that flows from underneath earth is called Maim Chaim. This is the whole inyan of the Kiddush Mechatas, and it putting the Maim Chaim into the Efer. This is the Hamshacha of the source of Chacham, which is this level of Bittul, into the Efer, which is this level of Tov Shebenega. Nisbar Makar Shasha Dibur. It's refining the source and root of speech. This level of para with a hey is the par of hey, which represents the hey gvures, which separates the voice, the simple voice that comes out from the person's lungs to be formed by the mouth and the palate and to become speech in a revealed fashion. And through this burning of the paraduma remains only the source of speech, which is the afer. And through the chaim, through adding the water to the afer, this represents the mshach of bittul, that memela, all these pardu kol playavin. It doesn't tell him ve'ein lahem achiza klal, that there's no achiza for the tuma. And so that's what the kiddush mechatzis represents. Now the hazaya represents the idea of lahamshich, this level on the nefesh amitar min tuma, onto the person that needs to be purified from the tuma. And therefore, an isha is pasula to do the sprinkling. Why? Because an isha comes to the level of gvures, which is the level of malchus. As it says, Mishlei Regleha Yerdis Mavis, which is the level of dibur, which is the source of chitzainim. And therefore, she doesn't have the koyach to push away this ruach hatuma. However, katan, which is the level of dechar, masculinity, this level of midas, which does not have any achiza to gvura. Rather, it's still in this level of katnus and midas avavira. He is able to remove this ruach hatuma. And even that the katan does not have any das, nevertheless, he's still able to remove and push away their ruach hatuma, because also in them there's no level of das, as is written in the Zohar, Parshas Mishpatim. Kel achar isteras v'lei aved perin. It's possible that on this, it's alluded in the Rabbi and Parshas Noach, that ma hatahoim chulei kach ein masehen shel rashayim esaperes. Now in Likkutei Torah, the Rizal asks a question on this, that the neshamas of Likkutei Chavim Zolais Mishachim from the Gimel Klippos at Meis. That's the case of impairing. The answer is that the Likkutei Chavim don't have in the moyach hadas, but rather moyach chachma u'moyach bina. It is written Gambalei das nefesh lטוב in Mishlei. Therefore, it's written Shtei nashim zaynes terin siparin, and therefore the katan gam shein by das in ma'akev. That's not the case of the inyan of kiddush, of the mixing and the pouring the water into the ashes, which is the idea of elevating manukvin, of the gvuras of negel amaylam to my chaim, of mechastima, that the katan is puzzle because the hala needs to be through das dafka, because the bittul yesh la'ayin, this is through the level of das. The inyan of Avraham hikar is bayrai, and that the hakara means is the hargasha, this is the level of das. Therefore, the das ascends until keser, higher than chachma bina, which is the levels of hamshacha. And therefore, it's not in the klippas moyach das davka, because there's not this level of bittul in the way that hikar is bere. Rather, only the karulei alakad alakaya. And therefore, the katan doesn't have a gilu of das yet, for his puzzle to do the kiddush of mechatas. However, an isha is kshera to do the kiddush mechatas because an isha has das. Rather, it's just a lighter form of das, daita kala. that the das within the isha is only in the level in a manner of gvuris. And this is the daita kala. That's what it means, the nashim daita kala. What does kala mean? Kala represents kal hey. Hey represents 5 times chaf vav, which is the gematria of kal. Meaning to say, hey, 5 times 26 is the gematria of kal. So therefore, what's the explanation of this? That all the gvurais that are in the havayos, there's nimshachim in malchus. However, nevertheless, there's in it the das, and therefore in her the das. Therefore, she is kshera to make the kiddush mechatas. Because also this inyan of kiddush mechatas is an aliyah of gvura the klippas nega as refined in the mayim, and therefore the isha has in it itra the gvura, which makes her ksher lekadesh. So can continue saying the kacha kain eitz erez the ezev hishlechal tichserifas apara, in order to unite this level of chachma, which is level of bittul, which is a much higher level, the efer hapara, which is the level of nega madriga. This is a level that is much lower. This is specifically through the eitz erez and ezev. So eitz is this level of midas, which has in this level of gadlus and katnus. Eitz erez represents the tallest tree that exists, the cedar tree. It's the tallest of all the trees, which is this level of midas that is with the Cahnman. Ezev, which is grown in the wall, this is the lowest of all the trees. This is the level of tipas hayasoid. If the shpa comes from the level of yasoid, within the Nivraim, which is only in this level of Tipa, which is the Ha'ara Balma. Therefore, the Yud within the name Pinchas, Shekina, Kina Sabres, is the level of Yisoid, what the Pinchas did to Zimri and Cosby. So this is the side Zira, the small yud. And similarly, the vav in the word ezav is also a small vav. So the meaning is that the side unites this level of chachma to become clothed in the nivraim, which is shachas ma'im into the efer para. And the shnitay las is the idea of binding this wool thread, red dyed wool thread, has this purpose of binding the eitz erez with the ezev, the tallest tree with the smallest tree, so to speak. The mshacha and this chibur is yumshach, the tipas mech in the side, to have the tipas yisoid, which is through the shniat tilas, this level of gvuris. We could also say that this inyan of this chabus eitz erez and ezev is in a manner in that which is written in Rai Mehemna at the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, the Asher and the Dal. So the Asher is the Amudadim to Isa, and the Dal is the Tzaddik, etc. And so you can look over there in more detail. As it relates to Parshas Kisisa, Hasher lo yarbev dal lo yam eat, with regards to the machtis shekel. Now in the Ma'arei it writes Ezev Nikra Hayisaid Vav Zira, and this unites with the Erez, which is the Vav Rav Rava, which is the Guf and Bris. That one can look more in depth, and where it explains regards to the birkas haaretz in birkas and mazon, and that our sages say that the bris and Torah have to be mentioned during birkas and mazon, which I guess alludes to Ezav and the heirs. Now, this is the Inyan of Elatolis Yaakov Yosef, meaning that this level of Erez is level of Yaakov. Similarly, it's brought down in Midrash Tanchuma Parshas Vayishlach that the Erez is Yaakov, as it says, Ke'erez Balvan and Yiska. Similarly, this is what we say in Shemona Esrei, that V'hanoira Kel Elyon. The Vav in the V'hanoira, the Gadol V'hanoira represents the V'hanoira of the Shemona Esrei, represents some Shacha to have this Gilui, this level of Noira, which is Noira is this Gilui, this level of Bittul, which is Nimshach from the level of Kel Elyon, meaning that which is higher than Seder Shalshos, and this union of the level of Erez with the large Vav Rav Rava, in order to that this Simshacha Bittul should be Yimshach. It's Nivraim, this is through the Vav Zeira, which is the level of Ezav canal. And that is the end of the third ice and the end of the mimer of this Dibra Maschal V'Yikchu Elecha Paraduma, part number 1. And tomorrow we are going to go into the beer and help explain these concepts in greater depth and clarity. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.